Hi, I'm Jo Bailey and thanks for joining me in this video where I'm looking at Dr. Phil, the Dr. Phil Show, and asking whether what he does is helpful or harmful. Before I start, I want to give a big thank you, a big shout out to Ian. Thanks for being my latest supporter on Patreon. If you'd like to come and join me there, their link is below. But thanks Ian, I really appreciate it. So Dr. Phil, we all know him. Some love him, some, well, don't love him. But one thing is for sure, he's a bit of a household name and he is the only celebrity psychologist that I know of. But is he actually a psychologist? And more to the point, is he hurting people or is he helping people? When the Dr. Phil show started back in 2002, I was relatively new and inexperienced in the profession. And I was a big fan of Dr. Phil. I even used to tape him so I wouldn't miss an episode. I really loved his hard-lined, no BS, confronting approach. And sure, it did have that entertainment value, which something never really sat right with me. But beyond that, I thought, this is what some people need. A dose of reality, undiluted truth, an iron fist sort of approach. But almost 20 years later, and with a couple of decades of professional growth and experience under my belt, I have to say the iron fist approach really requires a velvet glove. I'm more for challenging people when they need it. I mean, if they could fix their problems or their situations, they probably would have already done so by now. And they'd be unlikely forking out big bucks in some instances to get help and support. So clearly whatever they've done in their own lives hasn't worked. So some sensitive challenging is a requirement of psychotherapies. But that challenging has to come from a place of genuine concern. It has to come from a therapist's desire, authentic desire to help, and they have to be non-judgmental. But does Dr. Phil do that? Is Dr. Phil non-judgmental? Well, he thinks so. Just ask him.
I'm probably the least judgmental person I've ever met.
Well, here I am talking about not judging, and in a way, I'm judging Dr. Phil. But I do think there's a difference between judging our patients who are struggling, who are desperate, who are unwell, and holding our peers to account, especially if we see them acting in a way that we might think is unethical or exploiting the patients. So I'm going to be offering my opinion in this video, and in a way I'm going to be passing judgment on Dr. Phil because what's good for the goose? And I am being colloquial here. I'm not insinuating that Dr. Phil is a goose by any means, right? I don't know Dr. Phil, I've never met the man, but in my opinion, he doesn't seem to be someone who acts very ethically at all. And ethics is an area of practice, our psychological practice, that's not just morally guided, but it is legally enforceable through our professional and governing bodies. We must adhere and uphold the code of conduct when we practice in this profession. But here's the catch. Dr. Phil insists he is not practicing and that he doesn't offer therapy or treatment on the show. Well, he sure seems to act in a way that a therapist acts, a brutal therapist at times too. So he can't really have it both ways. If you've ever watched the show, and who hasn't, he really seems to exploit people. And these are people that are vulnerable, they are needy, and sometimes very unwell. And he's doing this for financial gain, for ratings. And that's pretty stinky. He makes about $80 million a year. Not bad salary for a psychologist. By comparison, the average psychologist with his level of higher degree qualifications in Australia will make probably around $100,000 to $110,000 if they're lucky. Some even less. So he really has 80 million good reasons to keep doing what he's doing, even if what he's doing isn't so nice. Yes, he donates to charities, which is a good thing, of course, but he has the dough to throw. And to be fair, he does sometimes offer or provide treatment options to guests. He might send them off interstate to a rehab, or he might provide ongoing treatment regimes through psychologists that he has connections with. But he also dangles his help, a bit like a carrot in front of the guest, in exchange for an appearance on his show. Take, for instance, a guest who said she felt like she had a choice, foster care or the Dr. Phil show.
The only reason why I'm here is because it was between foster care or Dr. Phil. I didn't have a choice to come.
She chose the Dr. Phil show, or the girl who was bailed out of jail for $30,000 in exchange to appear on the show with Dr. Phil. Is that exploitive? Well, yeah, absolutely it is. Dr. Phil really isn't acting in the role of a psychologist at all.
Are you kidding me?
He's not putting the needs of his clients ahead of his own agenda.
You filled this up with vodka, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And it's still got some in it, a little bit.
Can I have it?
He's an entertainer who has studied psychology and who doesn't even have a license to practice anymore. So he's treading a pretty thin line here. If one of my students behaved with this degree of superiority or arrogance or judgment, that the same sort of style that he has, well, they wouldn't be my student for very long.
You know what bothers me? If you have a high-profile mental health professional here advocating for your children to stop an attacker, I would think that would be a time that you just wouldn't want to interject.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You know, my dad used to tell me, never pass up a good chance to shut up.
Even the California Board of Psychology recognizes he's not able to hold a license doing what he does, and as such, Dr. Phil had to surrender his license in 2006 to continue with the show. And he knows very well that he's not allowed to call himself a clinical psychologist when he's not licensed as one. To do so would cause him to be non-compliant with the professional regulatory board of his state.
I'm trained as a clinical psychologist, a forensic psychologist.
He's an entertainer who happens to have a degree in psychology, and what he does on stage is certainly not an example of what psychologists do or should do in therapy. And there are many times I've just cringed watching the show and the way that he speaks to people, especially when he has his groupies in the audience, egging him on, clapping and cheering, applauding the way that he is berating or belittling his guests at the time. It's embarrassing and it's hard to watch.
To point out what a worthless bitch she is in a minute, okay?
Oh, I'm not saying she's a worthless bitch.
Yeah, no, yes, you are, actually. And do not insult my intelligence by trying to think that I don't understand how derogating your comments are when you make them. I am not a fool. I am not a fool.
Dr. Phil has on numerous occasions demonstrated appalling judgment, and that we all make errors of judgment. I know I have, but Dr. Phil has made a living out of it. The most publicised example being his handling of Britney Spears in 2007 when the family approached him to help Britney. It was meant to be a private matter, a plea for help, but Dr. Phil ended up making a bit of a spectacle out of this and used it to gain more ratings for himself. He later was forced to publicly apologise, but come on, who does that to a patient? He really has confused the line between performer and professional.
Let me be clear. I certainly do not apologize for trying to help this family or this girl in trouble.
Even his apology lacked a little bit of sincerity. It was more of a plea or an explanation to his fans why they should keep calling him Dr. Phil rather than a formal apology. It's all pretty bizarre. He also had another disciplinary matter earlier in his career, and as a result, he had to receive some supervision and counsel himself. And from then on, there have been many examples of poor judgment. I mean, you only need to watch a single episode of the Dr. Phil show to find something that he says to be dubious or questionable. There have been many other allegations and complaints made against him too.
What? I don't understand you people.
For me, it's his mannerisms, it's his ego and his I know best kind of attitude.
Shut up. Shut up.
And really, what I think looks a bit like a superiority complex that caused him to go from hero to zero in my book. And he overtly promotes himself as more powerful, smarter, and better than his guests.
Would you like to leave? Because you can certainly leave, because nobody tells me who to put on my show, including you. Okay. So if you don't...
Dr. Phil makes out that he's some kind of expert in his guest's life. I tell my patients, all the time that they are the experts in their life, not me. I'm just here to guide and to walk beside them. He can be derogatory, he can be mocking, and he can even be a bit of a bully when he wants to be, especially towards the guests that you can tell he doesn't like.
There's some keys right in front of me. I know where the car at.
You know where the car at? Did you go to the 5th grade?
And the way he gets his groupies, the audience, to rally behind him.
No, I'm asking, how far did you go?
To clap, to cheer. It embarrasses, and sometimes you can see it belittling the people on the show. And this is some of the more unprofessional and inappropriate conduct that I've seen from Dr. Phil.
On City Trust and Savings Bank for $24,979.22, your total indebtedness. If I give you this check to hit the reset button and start over,
I would go to school.
you would go to school.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would get you out of debt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that ain't happening.
He can come across as very disconnected, as egocentric and self-absorbed at times, acting out of a place of privilege and judgment. And he's simply oblivious to the conditions and the mental fragility of some of the people he's purporting to help. Dr. Phil can avoid malpractice suits because he's not a registered or licensed professional. He is an entertainer.
The bottom line here is that Dr. Phil no longer has a license to practice psychology because he elected to retire his license. So he has no duty, legal or ethically, to maintain confidentiality in any event.
You only have to watch one of his shows and you know it's a very slippery slope. And still, at least in part, he's engaging in the appearance of being a practicing professional, even though he's not. The show is just a cleaned up, sterilized version of a Jerry Springer show at times, and it's bound to push someone too far over the edge one day. And that's something that bothers me and scares me. But he continues nonetheless, and people for the most part seem to like this kind of entertainment. I confess, I was one of them for a long time. Maybe seeing the chaos and the dysfunction and the vulnerability of other people's lives makes us feel a little bit better about our own. Or maybe it's just interesting to peep into the private lives of others. I mean, humans are curious and a bit snoopy like that. We like to take a look, even when we shouldn't. It seems to be in our nature. And that's okay, as long as the person that you're looking at, the one sharing their private life and vulnerabilities, has given informed consent and fully understands the extent and the consequences of their exposure on a show like this. But often, it's pretty clear that informed consent has not happened.
Todd, Dr. Phil.
Hi, I'm Todd. Nice to meet you.
How you feeling, man? Can you walk?
Barely.
Brandon, why don't you get over there and take Debbie's spot?
Yeah, I'll go.
Unhappy guests have later regretted their appearance on the show and even laid complaints and serious allegations of being mistreated, being lied to, being manipulated, or, as in the claims made by former guest and Survivor winner Todd Herzog, claiming that he was given alcohol and Xanax during the taping of the show to ensure for even better entertainment at his own expense.
And I was completely sober. And then they pull me into my dressing room, and there was 2 liters of vodka and like some Red Bulls and orange juice and stuff like that. You know, being unsupervised by my parents, I drank the entire bottle. And then at some point, somebody gave me a Xanax. They said, "This will calm your nerves." And so I had been drinking and took a Xanax, which I've never taken Xanax before in my life. And I know that can be a deadly combination, so why it was given to me, I don't know.
Employees have also made allegations of mistreatment and emotional distress, like Leah Rothman, who, in 2015, filed a lawsuit for false imprisonment after claiming the good doctor locked staff in a guarded room and yelled at them for a long time because apparently there was some kind of leak to the media. The point is, many feel they've been exploited and used and not helped as they were promised.
Making me feel like a failure. I don't know. I know that
I'm a failure.
I am a failure. I'm a complete and utter failure.
I'm sure there are people who have reported and even benefited from their encounter with Dr. Phil.
I just tell people to get real.
He has a fan base, and being in his presence may have even been the placebo effect that was needed for some people to recover. Maybe he genuinely and honestly helped some people. No doubt he has, but I tend to think his show is much more harmful than helpful. In fact, I would suggest it's not only unhelpful for some people with serious mental health conditions, but could potentially be very dangerous for them. So I can't, as a real psychologist, endorse anything that might exploit sick, vulnerable or desperate people in the name of entertainment or psychology.
How it feels when somebody lies about you and tries to make you look crazy in front of everybody. It's funny, but
Actually,
the funny thing is you're going to be proven to be the liar today,
Well,
not me.
not unless you stop talking.
Mental health should always take precedence over ratings. And for me, Dr. Phil sold out big time. Sorry, Dr. Phil, but I'm not a fan.
Are you kidding me?
That's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you next time. Bye for now. So Dr. Phil, we all know him. We all love him. I don't love him.
I'm not even a psychologist.